How we doing, fellas? Welcome in. Extra Dough, episode 11. College football season, it's almost here, but not quite yet. We're going to continue our conference preview series with the Big 12. Going to go team by team. This is going to be hitting each team from a betting perspective. So I'm going to go, picking over or under for each team total. Tell you if I feel strongly about that or just a lean. But we're going to go break down the teams, break down any big changes heading into the season, and also hit on, what we're looking for this season, if there's any good angles, going team by team. So let's get straight into it. By the way, we're going to go by conference title odds. So from shortest to longest odds. And first up, that's Oklahoma. They are listed at plus 200 to win the conference. Finished 11-2 a season ago, and that was considered a down year for Oklahoma, which is quite crazy when you think about 11-2 being a down season. Similar with Ohio State, we talked about last week, but that's the case when you're at Oklahoma. So they do have a decent amount of returning production when you consider the changes and the fact that Lincoln Riley basically went in and pilfered a lot of what they had going on in that program, right? Caleb Williams is gone, Mario Williams, etc. But they actually returned more than a lot of people might think, even though they only returned 10 starters. They did restock decently. We'll probably talk about this as I get deeper on into the conference. But these teams at the top of the conference, I'm not really looking to bet this year because I don't love the odds. I do think Oklahoma is probably the rightful favorite. I would still power rank them first personally, but it's definitely not a strong read at all. So why is it not a strong read? I mean, quite frankly, Lincoln Riley's not there, and Brent Venables is a good coach. He's been rumored for jobs in the past, but we haven't seen him be the head coach at this level. We just don't know what it's going to look like. There are unknowns that we did not have previously. So he did spend 13 years on Bob Stoops' staff. And he's been at Clemson since 2012, coaching up some of the best defenses in college football. Don't get me wrong. I love the job that he does there. But last year, they weren't good defensively. They allowed 391 total yards per game, so almost 400 yards per game. In Venables' system, it's super aggressive, right? He throws a lot of odd looks at you. He's super pressure-based, a lot of weird blitz packages. It's not an easy one to pick up. So if you're looking at this team and thinking they're going to pick it up immediately and be amazing on defense, I wouldn't say that. I do think they should improve, certainly, because they have talent. They had a lot of guys drafted last year in the NFL draft. That just tells you the talent level that's on this team. But I don't know. I don't think the system's going to be learned overnight. They're also, offensively, there's going to be a new system as well. And this one I also think fairly highly of. So I see how the wheels are turning here at Oklahoma. I see the plan they're trying to make. You get Jeff Lebby in as your offensive coordinator. We saw him at UCF. We saw him at Ole Miss last year, and we've seen what he can do with quarterbacks. So you get Dylan Gabriel transferring in at quarterback from UCF. Kind of an all-or-nothing quarterback is what he's been in the past. I think working with Lebby, again, he has familiarity. He did work with Lebby before. I think is going to be a good switch. And then you have Marvin Mims at wide receiver. So you have the talent. They're going to be good offensively. I'm not sure they're going to be quite the Death Star some people are expecting. They're going to score a lot of points, but I don't think the efficiency is going to be like top 5 or anything. That's certainly not what I'm anticipating. And the way some people are talking about them, they think they will be. So, I mean, I don't. I do think it's big. They got the offensive line coach to stay. Bill Bedenbaugh, one of the better offensive line coaches in college football. I want to read a quote that their center, Andrew Rahm, said after they brought him back. He said, "When we heard Coach B was coming back, that was for sure a plus. Every guy in the O-line room was happy about it. We knew we were going to be set this year." So I like to look at quotes. I like to pick quotes. I like to see what the team's actually thinking. And it was quite clear from the quotes on the team that it was huge for them, and it was just as big for them as it was for me as an outsider. Why is Oklahoma constantly churning out these power rushing attacks that work with their passing attacks? That usually is not easy to do. I think I want to tip my cap to the offensive line coach. So keeping him from jumping ship and joining Lincoln Riley, I know there were rumors that they were butting heads and whatnot, so maybe that had more to do with it, but I think that's huge. So they're going to be up near the top of the conference. If you take a look at their schedule, they could actually be favored in every single game. So it's right there for them to make a playoff run. It really wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility whatsoever. The road games are at Nebraska, TCU, and Iowa State. So the Iowa State game, it's both teams are coming off a bye in late October. You have to go to Morgantown, and you have to go to Lubbock. And you're going to win those last two. Nebraska, TCU, Iowa State. You could take all those. I think realistically, if things go wrong, you could lose like 4 games this year. So their win total set at 9.5. I think there's a wider range of outcomes than some people are anticipating. So I'm not super confident on either side here. I think I would still lean the over. I think 9 or 10 wins is probably what I'm seeing here on the schedule, with 10 probably a little bit more likely, but I'm really not confident in that at all. So yeah, let's move on. Texas Longhorns. Yeah, they finished 5-7 a year ago, and yet they are picked as the second shortest odds in the conference to win it all. That's Texas for you. They're an anomaly. They got a lot of fans. It is what it is. A lot of people love to bet Texas, whether they're good or not. I'm going to talk about why I do think they actually will be pretty good this year. Plus 275 to win the conference. Team total for the season is set at 8.5, their win total. Return 13 starters and rank 57th in returning production. That's 6 starters returning offensively and 7 returning defensively. So overall, Steve Sarkisian, it was not a good year last year. Year one, it was really bad. They hit a really, really bad stretch, and they lost to Kansas. That tells you how your season went. It was a bad year. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to make excuses whatsoever. I think they have a culture problem, and I don't say that lightly. I think all the rumors and all the stories I've read about them clearly having a culture problem is correct. That's not saying they're not going to turn it around. That is my biggest concern with the team. We know the talent's there. They're recruiting great. Their offensive line is still a little concerned, but they're recruiting well there. I'm not sure that those dividends are going to pay off enough for them in 2022. We'll see when they play Bama week 2. What that offensive line is looking like, right? So I just still have my questions. I think overall this season, like, they seem very confident. Like, oh, we have a culture issue. Let's take in quote unquote problematic transfers, right? Like, again, I don't want to use that term too freely, but like Ajayi Hall's coming in, and there were some rumors about him. I mean, Quinn Ewers, there aren't that many rumors, but there's been people just saying he's following the money train, skipped his senior year of high school, yada yada, when he clearly wasn't going to play, yada yada yada. But I'm not that negative about all that. I think that's just a lot of talk. But I am certainly concerned about the culture, because when you look at the talent on this roster, they could be the most talented team in the conference. It's them and Oklahoma. We've seen Oklahoma be more consistent in the past, but now, like I said, that consistency factor is taken away by the fact that you're learning 2 different schemes, replacing your quarterback, lose a lot in the transfer portal. So I think this conference is there for the taking, and I am somewhat bullish on Texas. I'm not betting them because for the conference odds, because those odds are shitty. Everything would have to go right for those odds to look good, and I think everything can go right, but that's too many ifs for me to bet. But overall, I do have a positive opinion of this team. Like, the offense is going to be amazing. You get Quinn Ewers at quarterback, one of the highest rated quarterbacks in the history of 247 coming out of high school. Xavier Worthy was a star as a true freshman at receiver last year. He's going to be an even bigger star the next 2 years. Isaiah Nair transfers in from Wyoming. He's going to be a breakout star. He broke out last year, but it was in Laramie, so no one cared. I cared. You're great, Isaiah Nair. Keep doing what you're doing. You get Jaleel Billingsley, problematic transfer. He wasn't really problematic. Ended up in Saban's doghouse last year. Saban loved to talk about how Billingsley was in and out of the doghouse that year. They're loaded. You still have Jordan Whittington as a great slot option. Like, I think this offense is just going to be absolutely fantastic, and offense is the name of the game in college football. Like, that can sound oversimplistic, but if you're talking about an offense that is just like decent or just okay, and you say, well, their offense is good. Offense matters more in football. Like, this offense could be legitimately super, super good. Like, I'm expecting top 5 with Steve Sarkisian, Bijan Robinson. I see no reason why they wouldn't be. So looking at the schedule, you play ULM and UTSA in the non-con. Those are probably 2 wins, although UTSA could pull a shocker. Don't be surprised at all. It's a very good program, and Texas has not been a good program. You play Alabama, so chalk that up as an L, most likely. the schedules are not really bad in the Big 12 play. Like they could win a lot of games if they get hot. You can win every road game at Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, K-State, Kansas. Oklahoma State and Kansas State are difficult, but you're probably more talented than those two teams. For home games, West Virginia, Iowa State, TCU, Baylor, you could win all those too. And then, of course, the Oklahoma is the only other game I didn't mention. So every game's winnable. It really comes down to how much this program has changed for the better under Steve Sarkisian, and that's a huge question mark. That's the biggest one I have with this team. So overall, I think I'm bullish on Texas. It might take a little while to click. That Bama game, I'm not going to be bullish on them at all because I just think it's a bad matchup. Like I said, the offensive line, the defense are both going to get torched, certainly in my opinion. So I guess they could score 45 because, like I said, I think they're going to average not too much under that. So anyway, I think the talent's insane on the offensive side of the ball. So I lean over 8.5, but no way I would take that because I don't see any value. Like I said, it's always going to be juice to the gills with Texas. All right, Oklahoma State. They made it to the Big 12 championship last year, won 12 games. That's tied for a program record. Mike Gundy just keeps churning out winning teams. They've won 16 or been to 16 consecutive bowl games. I believe they've won. They've had 8 10-plus seasons. I'll have to fact check that, but plenty of 10-plus seasons under Mike Gundy. Win total set at 8.5, plus 550. In future odds, they do return 11 starters, 7 offensively and 4 defensively. But the issue is they rank 111th in returning production. This team loses so much from last year. They're gonna look like a different team this year, in my opinion. I mean, it's a Mike Gundy coach team, and he's been pretty remarkably consistent. But I would forecast this probably on the lower end. And again, there are question marks, so it could be positive, but I'm overall just leaning negative. So let's take a look at what we have here. You have Spencer Sanders back at quarterback, and he's really plateaued. And it's the curious case with these veteran quarterbacks in college football. In general, I will give them a pass. We'll talk about some later, like Adrian Martinez at Kansas State. But in general, I mean, we saw Kenny Pickett take a huge step forward last year. And not everyone's Kenny Pickett. Not everyone has Mark Whipple as their offensive coordinator chucking the ball around. But I think those years and experience in college, I've just seen so many players just get incrementally better. And whether or not there's a huge leap their senior year or not, they're still improving every year. Like, you can't overstate that. Teams in college football are not experienced because these kids have 4 years in college. Well, COVID year, red shirts, yada, yada. And a lot of them are transferring nowadays. Playing in the same system, staying at the same program, year after year. I truly believe it counts for something. So Spencer Sanders, I'm not going to talk bad about him at all. I view him as a positive coming back. I am worried about this offensive in general, though. Like, I don't think they're going to be that good. It's a Gundy team, but they've really trended more towards the defensive side of the ball, and I think they have reason to take a step back there as well. So I think both sides of the football could take a step back. Offensively, they'll need a wide receiver to emerge after losing Tay Martin. Gundy always has a wide receiver one, so I don't know who it's going to be on this team. Is it going to be Jaden Bray, most likely? Right, and you do have Brendan Presley as a great slot receiver, although usually the slot is not the guy to be the wide receiver one in a Gundy offense, so that would be abnormal. So I have questions there. And then they were really a running team last year. They averaged 44 rushing attempts per game last year, and they weren't like great at it. They were okay. They averaged 4.2 yards per attempt. But this season, I mean, again, you lose Jalen Warren to the NFL, the running back. Dominic Richardson looks like the starter. He could be the guy. They don't seem overly enthused, but he sounds like probably a bell cow. So questions at wide receiver, questions at running back. And it's not like they were dominant in the trenches a year ago offensively. And I think the game plan might need to change a little this year because you were playing with the lead a lot last year. You won 12 games. You beat Baylor once and then lost to them in the conference championship game. So you were a damn tough team. You beat Notre Dame in the bowl. I'm just not sure they're going to be at that level this year because defensively, you lose Jim Knowles to Ohio State. If Ohio State wants their defensive coordinator and goes and gets him, that's probably a sign that guy was pretty dang good at his job. He had the best defense in the Big 12 last year, and that was saying something considering Baylor was in the conference. So, I mean, you get Derek Mason as your defensive coordinator. And listen, I like Derek Mason. I will defend Derek Mason. I think he gets a bad rap because he had to coach at Vanderbilt for a number of years. I believe it was 2014 to 2020, off the top of my head. Don't quote me. But he was at Stanford before that and did a great job as defensive coordinator. I think he's a very solid defensive coordinator. Was at Auburn last year and Auburn was a shit show. So who knows? Vandy, shit show. So who knows? But he's not Jim Knowles. Like Jim Knowles right now, if you're power ranking defensive coordinators, a lot of people will put him like number 1 in the country or top 3, top 5. He's certainly top 5 in my opinion. So I'm just not sure you can be elite on that side of the ball when you return only 4 starters and lose your defensive coordinator. So anyway, I think the overall, like that's going to change the offense as well, right? You can't just keep running the ball in the line of scrimmage, trying to get 24 points and win the game, because 24 points may or may not win the game this season. So anyway, looking at the schedule. I think you're going to start 3-0. You play Central Michigan, Arizona State, and Arkansas Pine Bluff. So 2 wins there, most likely, and then Arizona State. I'm not high on Arizona State, but that should be a pretty close game. I'd obviously give the upper hand to Gundy because they are actually a functioning program right now, a highly functioning program, whereas Arizona State, yeesh. All right, so then you get a bye week. I don't like that bye week. That's too early in the season for me. Week 4. If you're looking at some other wins, so that gets you to 3 wins. I think they're going to win those non-conference games, and you have to get to 9. So I think you probably beat Texas Tech at Kansas, and then West Virginia at home to end the year. That will get us to 6, and you're going to need 3 more from at Baylor, at TCU, Texas home, at Kansas State, home for Iowa State, at Oklahoma. That's a tough stretch. At Baylor, at Oklahoma, at Kansas State. I'm really high on Kansas State this year. I don't know if you win those. Home versus Texas. We just talked about how good Texas could be. Home Iowa State. I guess you can give them Iowa State. I don't know. I would lean under. Nothing strong, but when you rank 111th in returning production and lose, the coaching staff change that we talked about with Jim Knowles, I would have to lean under. All right, Baylor Bears. I really like this program, man. Dave Aranda is one of my favorite coaches in college football, and he made a lot of fans last year when he won the Big 12, went 12-2. And right last year, everyone's talking about, Oklahoma's at the top of the conference. They're probably going to win, even if it's a down year. And like nobody was very high on any team outside of Oklahoma last year in the Big 12, and that just really wasn't the case. Like there were some solid teams. Everyone thought it was Oklahoma, maybe Iowa State, and those 2 teams had a down year. And Baylor stepped up, man. I think Dave Aranda is no joke. He really, he's no joke at all. So he has his work cut out for him this year, though, because you can tell, looking at their win total, 7.5. You're like, they won 12 games last year. What's going on? We'll talk about what's going on. It's pretty serious. You rank only 126th in returning production. 12 starters return overall. That's 6 offensively, 6 defensively. Okay. So first things first. Like I said, Dave Aranda, amazing. They won the Big 12 last year, and they have the fourth shortest odds. That's a little strange. This is kind of a Utah situation, where if you have followed me at all, any of these videos, shout out. One of the videos we did earlier on in the offseason, giving out Utah. I believe it was plus 500 we got them at to win the Pac-12, and that set's dropped quite a bit. Under plus 300 last year. I think plus 250 is where I saw him at one place. So anyway, it's kind of a Utah situation. Like people just... All right, let me go on a tangent here. A lot of the ways people view college football, it's either one, fandom. So they have a huge backing like Texas, where they're always going to have, their odds are always going to be juiced no matter what, because people are going to bet them no matter what, right? It's like if Conor McGregor fights, like when he was fighting Dustin Poirier a few years ago, a tangent, I know. His odds are going to be insane. This guy's like not a fighter anymore, but he just, right? And then he's fighting an actual fighter who's actually really tough and actually has a gas tank, and the odds are just closer than they should be, because people are going to bet Conor McGregor, whether, right, he's fighting Floyd Mayweather, and people are in boxing, and people are betting Conor McGregor. So anyway, where I'm trying to go with this fact, that's one way odds get skewed, is that people are going to bet them no matter what, and odds makers know that. Another way in college football specifically is not necessarily the odds, but when you have hype can drive a line, right? If you have hype behind a program, those teams are also going to be juiced. So Utah and Baylor, and I'm kind of putting the two together because they both had fantastic seasons last year, and then they're both being talked about this year like there's no way it's going to happen again. I think that's a joke. Just one of the ways this happens in college football is because you have certain media outlets, and a lot of them are recruiting services, recruiting outlets that talk specifically, not specifically, but predominantly about recruiting. And they base a lot of what they talk about based on those numbers. There's also spreadsheets, analytics, where you heavily, in college football, you rate talent because you there's not a lot of numbers in college to go off of, because like I said, a team returns like half their players from a year ago. There's a lot of turnover. There's not a lot of experience. So you have to kind of guess at the talent they have. Instead of guessing, you pull like a 247s, you pull a recruiting services, the talent that they have on the roster. And that always underrates teams like a Utah, a Wake Forest, a Baylor. It's teams that seriously develop talent, a BYU, and coach them up, any Brian Kelly teams, right? And coach them up to a level on the playing field that's not going to accurately show in your talent evaluation for that team. So they kind of get left out of both discussions, right? Because like Utah, Baylor, et cetera, they're not going to have like the biggest, they're not going to have a Texas fan base behind them. They're not going to have that hype, and their recruiting will miss some certain spots where they add in development and where they add being a very solid program, Dave Aranda being a very solid coach. So anyway, that's my tangent on Baylor. I do think they're underrated. I'm not fully buying in this year. I do think they can win the league, absolutely. So I don't hate that price. But they're a little bit different than like a Utah, for example, because their returning production is just not there at all. You have a new quarterback, new running back, new wide receiver, a new everything offensively. And it's kind of similar to what I said about Oklahoma State. Like, I think they're very similar, and they were very similar teams last year. I think they're very similar, again, how I'm viewing them this season, in that the defense was amazing last year, and it's just, quite frankly, it's going to be more difficult for that defense to be elite. This Baylor team lost so much defensively. They lost some studs in the NFL draft. And while Dave Aranda's a great defensive coach, I think they're obviously going to be solid there again. You're not sure it's going to be at that elite level. And then the offense, you lose everything. So there's going to be a lot on Jeff Grimes' shoulders, their offensive coordinator. He was a newbie last year, and he got a lot of high praise after last season. And I'm not saying I'm like super negative about Jeff Grimes, but I think he could be being overrated. Like, I'm not confident this offense is going to be elite because they were overrated last year. Like, the defense was amazing, and the offense finished 6th in EPA per play last season, so they were okay. And now everything's new. I do like their quarterback Blake Shapen, but I don't know who he's going to be throwing the ball to other than Sims, their tight end. They need guys to emerge. Tay McWilliams looks like a pretty good running back, but last year they had one of the best running back tandems that worked perfectly together, Tristan Ebner and Abram Smith. This year, it's like, I hope a guy steps up is basically what you're saying. So yeah, all that being said, the schedule isn't super easy. You get BYU, you have to go to Provo week 2. Yikes, that's not good. Like, BYU returns pretty much their entire team from a year ago, and that was a team that went 6-0 against the Pac-12, beat that Utah team we were talking about. So anyway, I'm going on a tangent here against Baylor. All that being said, I don't want to take an under for a Dave Aranda program. I think 7.5 is still a low number. So pretty much any time with Baylor, I'm always going to back them because I always think they're going to be a little bit underrated. Is what I'll say there. Okay, moving on. Oh wait, we're going to take a quick break. Kansas State. I'll try not to go on a tangent on them. I like Kansas State. So quick break. I want to let you guys know what the plans are this season. So we're wrapping up the season. It's getting here. It's August. Week 0 starts. I believe when's the first game? August 27th? Go check my calendar. Should be circled. It's coming. It's right around the corner. So what we're going to do, if you're not following, so it's at YonkersCFB on Twitter. That's also my YouTube channel name. So I'm going to post this video on that channel as well, because some of you might have missed. I've been doing these videos on the Daily Bread Media channel, these preview videos. So if you follow me on YouTube, I've done, and if you don't, that's okay, I'll let you know. I do the DFS previews. Each week I cover the main slate every single Saturday for college football. There's not a lot of that content out there. For other sports there is. For college football, there's not a lot of people who are sick in the head enough to dive that deep into these teams. But we do, so I do. So this year, it's not going to be on my personal YouTube channel. I'm going to post those preview videos. Should be the exact same, with one twist I'll tell you about. They're going to be posted on the Daily Bread Media YouTube channel. So if you are not following the Daily Bread Media YouTube channel, go follow it right now. I will post a link. It'll be in the description. I'll see if my editing skills are good enough to have a little pop-up box telling you to subscribe right now to both channels. But that's where the videos are going to be posted. We're going to go midweek, just like we've done the last 2 seasons. So really looking forward to it. We break down every team and talk about the relevant players so you can try to win some money on DraftKings or FanDuel for the college football. Gives you something to root for. If you're not invested in the games, you can be literally invested in the games. Anyway, one twist this year, I'm going to have a guest joining me I have an announcement coming later, but I will have somebody on with me, so we're going to break down the full slate, and it's going to be great information. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure you are subscribed to the Daily Bread Media YouTube channel if you are not. All right, let's continue. Kansas State. Kansas State finished 8-5 a season ago. Their win total set at only 6.5. Seems low. Conference championship odds plus 1,200. I'm going to tell you right now, that's. I'm not recommending a lot of plays here, but in this conference, I don't think there's a clear-cut winner at all. That makes me not want to take the top teams. That makes me want to fish a little lower for some juicier odds, and I like plus 1,200. They returned 14 starters, ranked 57th in returning production. 7 starters returned both sides of the ball. So this is one of my favorite teams to bet last year. I just like this program. Again, they're a program I just think is underrated for a lot of reasons I've mentioned earlier. Kind of apply to a lot of teams college football. So I really like their coach. I like Kleiman. I think they're going to be good on both sides of the ball. I think it's kind of that simple. They're ready to win right now. I don't really see any major downsides outside of depth. If someone gets injured on this team, they're a lot more susceptible. That's where that talent number would really come into play than other teams. So it's volatile. If they stay healthy, I think they could. I think they have a legitimate shot at winning the conference. And I don't think that's crazy whatsoever to say. But the odds are making it sound a little crazy. So when I see that discrepancy, it makes me say this is the team I'm looking at. So they have a new offensive coordinator. So they get Klein in, and he has said that he wants to run a tempo spread. And we saw that in the bowl game because he was on the staff and then was elevated to OC for the bowl game, where they dropped 42 points on LSU, 442 total yards on the Tigers. Now, I understand that LSU team was depleted. They had a lot of opt-outs, but it was at least encouraging, and we saw proof of concept that he said he wants to go tempo spread, and the offense looked like, Kansas State's been stuck in the mud for what seems like a long time, and they didn't look stuck in the mud at all. So Adrian Martinez transfers in from Nebraska as your quarterback, and I love to make fun of Adrian Martinez. I'm not his biggest fan. But it's almost like a post-hype thing. Like, people are writing him off. Like I said, he has a ton of experience. Yes, he turns the ball over too much. I understand that. Yes, he could be a better passer, but he's extremely athletic. He can run the ball very, very well. And I think he's going to run the ball a lot in Klein's system. Because you remember, he was a Heisman finalist his days at Kansas State, running the ball at the quarterback position. So he's going to do that perfectly with Adrian Martinez, I believe. You have a star, Deuce Vaughn, at running back. You have a star on the defensive line. Forgive me if I butcher your name, but Anudike Uzamoa. No, let me do that again. Anudike Uzoma. I think that was better. That kid's probably one of the better players in college football. A lot of people haven't heard about. Like, I don't know how you watch that team and don't be like, wow, that kid is a stud in the front seven. So I just think they're going to be good everywhere. Look at the schedule. South Dakota, Missouri, and Tulane in the non-conference. I think you win all those games. I'm not super high on Missouri, so some people might give them 2-1. I could see that as well. The road games are all tough. The schedule is not super easy. At Oklahoma, at Iowa State, at TCU. And then late in the year, you have 2 consecutive road games at Baylor, and then the next week at West Virginia. Going to Morgantown's never easy. So I'm not sitting here saying the schedule sets up very well. And you also face Texas in a home game when Texas is off a bye. It's not easy, but I just think they're going to be a good team. I think they're being underrated, and I think they're going to win some games people don't think they're going to win because they seem to do that every year. I like Kleiman, and I like them on both sides of the ball. It's really, really fairly simple to me. All right, TCU. A lot of changes here with TCU. So Gary Patterson is gone. After 20 years, they finally have a new head coach. Gary Patterson now is a defensive analyst for Texas. They finished only 5-7 a year ago. They really fell flat. Their win total this year is at 6.5 plus 1,400 conference championship odds. I don't hate that number. They returned 18 starters, 10 offensively and 8 defensively, and they rank 3rd in the country in returning production. So there's a lot, just on a basic level, there's a lot to like for TCU. So one, they play 5 home games. So in the Big 12, you have 9 games. So you're going to have, some teams have more home games than road games. They have 5 home games. They rank 3rd nationally in returning production. There was a lot of quotes out there about the team kind of quitting. I don't want to use that word freely again, but the team kind of quitting under Gary Patterson last year. And now you have a coaching change, which could revitalize a talented team. There's a lot of positives to say. So I think they have a wide range of outcomes, but you can certainly see the positives here. And overall, I have to just lean towards the positive side. Sonny Dykes is their new coach from SMU. There's been a lot of positivity around him. Again, I'm not being negative here. I just want to point out, like, those SMU teams, they had really good offenses. They didn't have good defenses, and they couldn't win the big games. Like, they were fairly simple to me, and I could just kind of see that happening again here at TCU because I see the same thing. 9 starters offensively. I don't know who your quarterback's going to be, Chandler Morris, Max Duggan, but whoever is quarterback, they have a star in Quentin Johnson at wide receiver. I think Kendre Miller could be a breakout star at running back. You lose Zach Evans, but Kendre Miller was even more effective than Zach Evans at points, which I know sounds crazy to say, but he's a good player. Monty Bailey transferring in. Your offensive line returns everything. I just think they're going to be good offensively. I think they could win any game on schedule, to be honest with you. So, but I don't know. Again, I'm going to point that downside that it seemed that way for SMU in the past. But they just couldn't get over that hump. So expecting TCU to get over that hump, maybe you just say, well, the conference is wide open for the taking. Why not? And I could see that. I went through and marked the schedule, and I saw 6-6 as the most likely. But again, I think there's a big range of outcomes. Like winning 10 games would not be insane to me. Winning 9 games, I think is certainly in the realm of possibility. So, but when I'm going through the schedule, I'm giving them 6 because I'm a little more negative than some people are, even with all those positives on their side. All right, Iowa State Cyclones. 7-6 a year ago. Mightily disappointing season. They returned pretty much everything. They returned everything, and were supposed to compete for the Big 12, and they didn't have a great year. I will say statistically they were a lot better than their final record, but then they lose all those players who gave them those good statistics. 6.5 win total, plus 1,800 on the future odds, and you return 13 starters, but rank only 128th. Oh, that's wrong. Returning starters, that's wrong. That's from a different team. They returned 8 starters. I know that because they have 5 offensively and 3 defensively, so ignore that. 128th in returning production. That is near the bottom of the country, folks. All right, so what I'll say for them, they're being counted out this year. Let me tell you why they're being counted out, because there is reason. Again, they were supposed to be studs last year. They lose the faces of their program. Brock Purdy, 4-year starter at quarterback, you lose him. Breece Hall, mega talented running back, face of this offense, you lose him. The tight ends were heavily involved in this offense. You lose Charlie Kohler and Chase Allen, you lose your tight end usage. And then defensively, they had some transfers out in addition to guys who graduated. You returned 3 starters there. Guys like Ashim Young, names you would recognize are gone. There's a lot of negatives there. And when you underperformed a year ago and now totally replaced the team, I understand the negatives. I'm just going to be a little more positive here. That's why teams are counting them out. Iowa State is a team that performs best when they're counted out. They didn't perform with those expectations a year ago. Now with really, really, really low expectations this year. I mean, Matt Campbell's a darn good football coach. He's been super effusive in his praise about the new pieces. So we'll see if they're as good as he thinks they are, but he thinks they're great. Hunter Deckers, their new quarterback, players on his team have been calling him like a future superstar, and he's going to be great, and he's going to lead this program. The running back room, Jarrell Brock's been waiting his turn. Looked pretty good in the bowl games to me against Clemson, against a good defense. He looked all right. Cartavius Norton, I mean, Campbell seems to think he's the future. He's the running back of the future, and you have some other good players in a running back room as well. Xavier Hutchinson is going to be a star at wide receiver this year. Experience, good option. And then defensively, I have huge concerns, especially in the secondary. But, I mean, Campbell's just been saying, no, we're going to be fine. He's been, very, very adamant. And normally I would say that's coach speak, and I am still worried it's coach speak. But, he's been, over the top. Every single quote is, he's trying to convince you. So I'm not saying he's convinced me. I am saying he made me second guess it. And Iowa State is a team that when they're counted out, they perform well. And I kind of have this feeling. Again, Big 12's right there for the taking. So while teams are talking them into, I could talk myself into a Sonny Dykes TCU team, as a lot of people have, and there's a lot of teams you can talk yourself into because it's a very tight conference. I mean, Iowa State could surprise people. That's all I'm saying. So I'm not overly confident on this team. There's a lot of negatives. When you look at the schedule, Southeast Missouri and Ohio should be free wins in the non-conference, but you also play at Iowa. rivalry game week 2. I think it's a defining year for this program. I really do. If these young guys step up and are great this year, I think they're going to be set going forward. I mean, people are going to be too high on them next year. It just seems like a program that people don't have a very good job of gauging what they're going to do. So 6.5. I mean, again, with all the negatives, you probably lean under. But there's no way in heck I'm going to bet a Iowa State under. Even with all that being said, there's no way I would do that with Matt Campbell. He has a penchant, again, for surprising. All right, West Virginia. They finished 6-7 a year ago. 5.5 win total, plus 2,800 in the future odds. Return 11 starters. Rank 127th in returning production. That's not what you want to see. Not exactly ideal. Now, Neil Brown is a highly respected coach. You hear a lot of coaches say a lot of positive things about Neil Brown. You hear a lot of media members. Every talking head loves Neil Brown. Eventually, he's going to have to show me something. I'm going to have to hear something other than praise and coach speak, because he's 17-18 across 4 years with the Mountaineers, and there's not like a lot. There's nothing like defining in this program right now. You can't point to, well, they're 17-18, but the recruiting's really, really, really great, or the defense is absolutely fantastic. They just need an offense. It's not. They've just been okay, totally mediocre in my opinion. So they do have a new look offense this year. We'll see if that really gets them over the hump. They have Graham Harrell coming in as the offensive coordinator. You'll remember him, one, from his air raid days at Texas Tech, putting up prolific numbers. You'll also remember him. He was the offensive coordinator in Southern California at USC the last couple of years. Had some good offenses at North Texas as well, but it kind of seems like it got a little stale, to be honest with you. Seems like he didn't really calling the plays, didn't really know when he wanted to establish the run. They ran the ball a lot in some games and not the other. It was just kind of volatile, I guess is what I'll say, and it didn't really it seems like it's been kind of on a downward trend, but overall his offenses, they've been good statistically, so I think it's certainly not a bad hire by any stretch. I think the recipe could be there. He gets JT Daniels, his former quarterback at USC, in, and he has a really good wide receiving core to throw the ball to, in my opinion. I don't know if I want to say really good, but good enough to run this air raid, in my opinion. You have Bryce Ford Wheaton and Sam Jones, the two veterans. And then you have Caden Prather is the young kid, 6'4", blazing speed. They tried to get him the ball a lot in the spring game, throwing it deep. I think he could have a breakout year. So overall, I think the offense is probably going to get better. Defensively, I have a lot of question marks because you only return 4 starters there, and pretty much everyone in the secondary transferred out. So I have questions there. But, the staff traditionally has had a decent defense, so I think they'll be okay there. So overall, I just think they're going to be kind of okay on both sides of the ball, which gets back to my mediocre statement. They're just okay. Looking at the schedule, the non-conference, yeesh. I think that's where this season is going to be. It's either going to be make or break in the non-con, because you play at Pitt, you play Towson, and then you play at Virginia Tech to start the year. So you have 2 ACC road games. If you win those 2 ACC road games, and you could, I remember I did bet them against Pitt because we got a good number. I'd have to look it up, but it was over a touchdown, and that's come in. You could win that game. I mean, Pitt loses a lot, but I would certainly think Pitt probably wins that game. I think a close one. But at Virginia Tech's not going to be very good this year. They're near the bottom of the ACC, but that's a Thursday game in Blacksburg. That's a hard place to play. We saw some weird stuff happen, right, at Virginia Tech. What could go wrong? A night weekday game, remember when UNC and Virginia Tech opened the year? Was that 2 years ago? Or was that last year? I think that was 2 years ago. And they kind of shocked everybody by beating North Carolina. Anyway, you want to go 2-1 there. I think you go 2-1 there. There's a chance. But if you open the season, you win all those games, you go 3-0. This team is cooking with gas. Even if you go 2-1, I think you're in business. But then it is a little weird because the road game against Virginia Tech, the next week they do have at Texas, so that's a difficult 2-game stretch, right? That's not what you want to see to start your conference play or in the non-con. So the schedule is not great. You do face Baylor when they're coming off a bye. Then the next week you play at Texas Tech, who's also coming off a bye. I think that's a tough scheduling spot. So overall, I very slightly into the under. But like I said, if they start the year 2-1, I'm going to be real nervous about that. And I think this could easily be a bowl team. So not confident at all. I think they either get 5 wins or 6 wins is what I'm seeing. All right, Texas Tech. 5-7 a year ago. That's wrong too. They went 7-6 a year ago. Sorry guys, my slides are all messed up. They went 7-6 because they won the bowl game against Mississippi State, I believe. 5.5 win total. Conference championship odds. Too high. Who's betting that? Somebody out there is. Return 12 starters and rank 80th in returning production. So overall, I think there's a couple of ways you could spin the outlook for the season. So on one hand, they fired Matt Wells last year. They fired their coach, and they started a rebuild. They hired Joey McGuire as their coach, and most people view that as a long-term hire because you're probably sitting there like, who the hell's Joey McGuire? That's what everyone thought when they hired him. Most people thought when they hired him. He was around at Baylor under Aranda. I talked about that program. He was around there when Aranda made that program to the Big 12, into a Big 12 championship team. And he's got great connections with the Texas high schools, McGuire. So I think he's more of a recruiting hire. You'll see that a lot nowadays, where guys are hired a lot for their recruiting because that's what college football is now, right? It's money in recruiting. So I think that's on one hand. On the other hand, however, this team had a winning record last season, even with a coach that they deemed fireable. So and I know the schedule is pretty easy, but they did it. They had a winning record. And also, the offense, you hired Zach Kitley. Who's Zach Kitley? If you haven't heard Zach Kitley, you need to know Zach Kitley. He is the offensive coordinator now he's at Texas Tech. Now he's in Lubbock. But he was at Western Kentucky last year when Bailey Zappi rewrote the record books. Jareth Stearns is his wide receiver, right? They came in from Houston Baptist. First year in the FBS, just did amazing things. So I absolutely love the offensive coordinator hire. But that would be my question there. Those are the two ways to view this. So overall, I'm going to view on the first side of things where I'm thinking kind of negatively because I do think this is a long-term thing. I think that's why they hired Joey McGuire. They admitted that this program, structurally, the defense just needs to be better. You need to change the way you recruit, right? You need to step your game up and just overall kind of change the philosophy of how you're approaching things from a program perspective. So I do think it's long-term. I'm looking pretty negative this year. Defensively, you hired DeRuyter as your defensive coordinator, and a lot of people are praising that hire, and I guess I'm not quite as bullish on him. He was at Oregon last year. I'm an Oregon fan. And Oregon ranked 75th in the nation in scoring defense a year ago. So smack dab right in the middle of the country. I just don't think that's good enough. Oregon, the talent they had relative to the rest of that conference, I just didn't think it was inspiring at all. Again, they were no positives to point to. It's kind of like West Virginia where you're well, it's okay. There's some positives, there's some negatives. There's just there's nothing overwhelming. That was DeRuyter at Oregon. Nothing about the scheme was impressive to me. Nothing to really point out. It's not that there were negatives, or just I don't know. And then defensively, the Red Raiders, they do lose their top 3 tacklers, so not super positive for me in 2022. Maybe in the future. You get Murray State in the non-conference, but your other 2 non-conference games are not easy. You play Houston, a home game, and then you have to travel at NC State. I kind of think you lose both those games. I know you beat Houston a year ago, but that's pretty good. Group of 5 team you're playing right there. Certainly not a cakewalk. So are you going to get to 4 wins in your conference to hit the over? I don't think so. You do have 5 home games, 4 road games in Big 12 play, but I don't think they get there. I'm not super confident on this team. I think their record was inflated last year by a pretty easy schedule, so I would go under. All right, last but not least, except they probably are least. Sorry, Jayhawks fans. Kansas Jayhawks. 2-10 a year ago. This was Lance Leipold's first season on the job. I am a huge Lance Leipold fan. I will say this. He has his work cut out for him. That's obvious. Everyone knows that. This is a long rebuild. But they showed some signs of life to end the year. They were certainly better to end the year than they were to begin the year. I think that's a sign of improvement. I think that is proof of concept of what Leipold's doing here. And I do think they will continue to get better. The question is, how much better do they get? Does that mean 3 wins this year? We'll see. It's year 2, and they finished last in the Big 12 in EPA per play on both sides of the ball. So clearly they're not going to be good this year, but are they going to spring a few upsets here and there? They upset Texas a year ago, I'll say that. So Lance Leipold, let's get into why I like Lance Leipold. I don't know if I want to go so far as to say he's one of my favorite coaches. Okay, I will. I will. First off, his history, why I really like him. He was the head football coach at University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. That's a Division III program. But he coached there from 2007 to 2014. While he was there with the Warhawks, they won the Division III championship in 2007, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2013, and 2014. They were also runners-up in 2008. So I just think Leipold knows how to have a winning program, how to sustain a winning program. And at Kansas, I mean, it's almost impossible to have that. But I think Leipold would be your guy. He went to, and you're like, well, that's Division III. He also went to Buffalo, and he was pretty good in the MAC. We saw his teams get stronger and stronger. Now he left, and of course, they took a step back last year, of course, because you need Leipold, in my opinion. One more. While he's at Wisconsin-Whitewater, he actually reached 100 victories faster than any coach in college football history. So I just think he's a winner, and Kansas is a place that it's hard to win at, and I think he knows how to build that program. So anyway, looking at the team this year, what surprised me in reading some of the preseason content on Kansas is that they really love their offensive line, which is like you would think in a long rebuild, the offensive line is way far off. They love this offensive line, and Leipold's scheme, they love to run the ball. They have 3 good running backs. Devin Neal, one of the highest rated recruits in program history. He's an awesome kid, was a freshman last year, had a good season. He's extremely talented. You get Kai Thomas as a transfer from Minnesota, where he ran for, I believe it was over 800 yards last season. And then you have Sevion Morrison, a Nebraska transfer that they like. So I think they're going to run the ball better than they did last year with that offensive line. You had Daniels as your quarterback, who really came on strong to end the year. So you have your quarterback. And then the defense is going to be bad because, of course, it is, right? They're still rebuilding. But overall, you need to get 3 wins to hit the over. I would have to bet the over. I couldn't bet the under. It's very possible they only get 2 wins, maybe 1, but I would have to bet the over. So here's why. You have Tennessee Tech to start the year. I'm going to say that's a pencil in W. Even though, of course, it's Kansas. It's not pencil in anything. I guess pencil, you can always erase it. Pencil that one in. You have Duke. That's at home. I know you lost to Duke last year, but that's a home game. And Duke, again, they're still in a long rebuild. First year under Mike Elko. I think Kansas wins that game personally. So that's 2. You'll need 1 more. At Houston is a very difficult non-conference game. You probably lose that one. So somewhere in Big 12, you need 1 more. I think at Texas Tech is the most likely. That's really, if that was a home game, like I would for sure be on the over. So that's unfortunate. It's in Lubbock. Or you could upset Iowa State or TCU. Because both of those games, here's why I circled those games. I know they're going to be heavy underdogs. Is because those are their first 2 Big 12 games. That's immediately after the Duke game. They have 3 straight home games. So if they do build momentum, they look good against Duke. Maybe a convincing win or whatever. They build momentum. They find who they are as a team, which they started to find at the beginning of last year, and then they returned 17 starters. I just think that's a good spot. Like you could build momentum and surprise a young Iowa State team. It wouldn't shock me at all. I'd be surprised, but I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever. So, and you might not even need those wins if you win that Texas Tech game. So, overall, I'd lean the over. Not super confident, but Lance Leipold certainly a coach I'd want to be on the over. All right, that wraps it up. Next week we're going to be back. We're going to preview the SEC. We're going to go live. I'm planning on Tuesday night. Tuesday night next week, we're going to go live with Sam Murphy. He's going to join me. Dumb Brain Picks. He goes on with Paid for Play for me. So we're almost at the season. Paid for Play. If you don't know what it is, we go live every Saturday morning to talk about betting some college football games. We talk about the top games of the weekend each and every single week. So with me, Sam, and Goose. So I'm going to have him on next week because he's an SEC guy, LSU fan, and really knows his SEC ball. So I'm going to have him on. We're going to go live. Usually these are pre-recorded. We're going to go live. Be different next year. So other than that, personal update. If you are interested in college fantasy football, you should be playing it. If you're interested at all. I know it's kind of niche, but yes, it is out there, and yes, you should be playing it. There's a site that offers it, and it's awesome. So if you're interested in that, you should be checking out Devy Watch. I previewed every single team. I wrote a conference preview for every single conference, every single relevant player on every single team. It took me a very long time. It was my off-season project. If you enjoy college fantasy football, you need to be reading that. So anyway, that's at Devy Watch. I'll link that in the description. And then also this season coming up, I got a lot planned. But one thing new this year, I'm joining Fantasy Points. They have a great NFL site, and they also have a PGA site that they launched as well. They're launching college football site this year. I'm going to be contributing. I'm looking forward to it extremely. I'm going to be covering the props for them. So we're going to have weekly college football betting props. Should be getting to some things like prize picks as well. And they're also going to have comprehensive DFS covered there as well. So anyway, Debbie watched Fantasy Points, 2 opportunities I'm extremely excited to be doing this year. So if you are interested in a personal update, there you go. All right, fellas, thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.